look, we don't all want the same things. So it is that time once again where I'm going to do my monthly video on LGBTQ plus representation in media. And I'm going to try something a little bit different this time because I'm not going to be going this one alone. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to start, because generally when I talk about LGBTQ plus representation, I talk about that as a spectrum, which it is. However, there are a lot of very specific slivers within that, and some of them I know more about than others. Some of them I have a better sense of the representation they have than others. And something that I wanted to do was bring in someone who is a member of the LGBTQ plus community, but who is not in the same sort of boat that I am, in the sort of gender fluid, genderqueer, transgender-ish umbrella, and instead sort of fall somewhere else in there and talk with them about representation of the kind of sexuality or identity that they have, or, as will probably often be the case, the lack of it. So this is my first go at that, and I reached out to a YouTuber who I follow, a booktuber by the name of Min Kobayashi, and she agreed to be on this. She identifies as asexual. And so from here, you're going to get to see the conversation that the two of us had. And if this goes over well, I may do other videos of this nature with other people, in, as I said, other members of the LGBTQ plus community. So we'll go from here and hope you folks like it. Okay, so Min, thank you so much. I'm really thrilled you said yes to this.
I'm glad we could finally do it.
So, I did ask you here because you came out on your channel a month or so ago as being asexual, and it sort of just hit me on the general notion that, I talk about LGBTQ representation in general, a lot of it from my own perspective of gender fluidity, and there are some elements of LGBTQ plus that I feel like I have my head wrapped around pretty well, but there are a lot of sort of slices of it that I'm like, I kind of know, but it'd be really great to get
it's hard to understand everything. You can't really do that. One person can only comprehend so much from their own experiences.
Yeah, and so just so that anyone watching sort of is everyone's on the same playing field and everyone understands what we're talking about, how do you describe asexuality?
Yeah, okay, so asexuality is a spectrum. It's something that's not just like one straight thing, but normally through definition it's described as the lack of or very little amount of sexual attraction to anyone, no matter their gender. So it means that you don't have the experiences of sexual arousal or anything like that in your life, but that doesn't mean that you don't have romantic attraction to other people, which is like a huge misconception. That there are people that are aromantic because we identify by romantic orientation. So you have the whole spectrum there. You can be biromantic, you can be aromantic, you can be panromantic, heteroromantic, homoromantic, the whole umbrellas of them, right? But yeah, it's the uniqueness of how all those orientations kind of go into one thing. And then there's also two other commonly used umbrella terms under asexuality, which would be gray sexuality, which is more you have sexual attraction sometimes, but very few times. It's not something that's very common in your life, but it does happen once in a while. So it's like the gray in between black and white. So it's on the spectrum there. And then demisexuality, which is when you only have sexual attraction to people that you're close with. It's something that you can build a relationship and then eventually you'll have attraction, but it's not something that's to people in general. And being asexual doesn't mean that you don't engage in romantic relationships or sexual relationships. That's really up to any person to figure out how they want to manifest their sexuality, I guess.
Well, that is interesting, that sort of coming to a sense of yourself and explaining it to other people, asexuality, that you do have to decouple romantic interest and sexual interest, which are really, they're generally conflated, I think, by most people. So it's one of those things that you have to kind of remind yourself. Like, I think intellectually a lot of us get that love and sexual attraction aren't the same thing, but they're so tangled up in each other for most of us. Now, I don't remember if you had mentioned in your coming out video, do you know your romantic leanings, or is that something you're still figuring out?
It is a very tricky thing to kind of understand, because I've only ever been in relationships with guys. I don't think that I'm attracted to females, but they're very pretty, so it's always really confusing. Because I look at a girl and I'm like, man, girl. But I've never experienced any relationships with women, so that's how I normally am. Like, I've only engaged in relationships with men. It's kind of hard to tell romantic orientation because it's so conflated with sexual stuff, right?
Fair enough. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are ones that if I knew no one else was ever going to watch this conversation, I probably wouldn't ask you. But I'm going to ask because I have a feeling that they're probably in the minds of at least some of the people who might be watching this. So, how do you feel comfortable identifying as asexual and are certain that it is not a case of you haven't met the right person or that it's a phase or that you're some form of late bloomer?
Yeah, see, that's something that I was told throughout my, like, entire life. I remember all through high school. Like, I'm 21 now, so I figured I'm, like, pretty sure I'm not a late bloomer. I'm pretty sure, like, puberty should have already ended for me, that's supposed to be a part of that experience. But, yeah, it really took until I didn't have a lot of romantic relationships when I was younger, mostly because I was scared that if I engaged in a relationship, then they'd want to go farther than I wanted, and I was just like, I don't like you like this. And I was always confused if people were friends or not, like, you know what I mean? It's all confusion in my head. And then after I was in 2 fairly long relationships, I was like, yeah, no, I feel like if I can love someone romantically and not have that sex drive, then it's not a phase, right? So I think it's really hard to figure that out, though, because sometimes you're like, well, I just haven't met the right person, right? But I feel like for me it's pretty well, like, I think it would have happened by now.
And I would consider that a fair assessment at this point, but I would imagine that's probably a question you're honestly probably going to have to continue to deal with well into your 20s. I'm very sorry to say.
I still get it, yeah.
It's a phase crowd, they cling to that.
Everyone is still convinced that I'm just secretly a lesbian, and as soon as I enter a relationship with a woman, I'll be perfectly fine. And I'm like, I don't think so.
I hate to ask, but how many of the people saying that are like, oh, you just don't know, and how many of them are being like, oh, once you date me?
No, I have a lot of gay friends, and I'm like, really? I'm always like, I'm the one straight friend in the group, so, like, TV always told me that you're supposed to be in love with me, but you're not. Like, none of my gay friends. I was like, really, man? And I'm just the ace friend over there in the corner. But, yeah.
Do you find that you get questions at all about your presentation? And by that I mean it's not a view held by people I usually like to be having conversations with, but it is still a perspective out there that a woman makes herself attractive through things like dressing well, doing her hair, wearing makeup, which you visibly do on your channel and today, that that people kind of assume you do that for the sake of attraction. Does that throw people off as well, the idea that you're doing that but don't have that kind of attraction?
Yeah, I just assume that people probably guess that people that aren't interested in sex wouldn't want to take care of themselves, which is a weird thing. It's like...
It is when you stop and think about it for more than a few seconds, yeah.
But I've never thought that. I'm like, so do you, like, wear turtlenecks? And, like, I was like, no, like, why would I do that? Like, I would still want to look nice in life, even if I don't want to have sex. Anyways, I don't understand that. But yeah, it is something that I've gotten before. It's like, so yeah, you wear makeup for guys, right?
I think it's the decoupling of a lot of societal baggage, because it's just a presumption that, and I mean, it's not a presumption exclusive to women. I think it comes up in conversation directed at women a lot more, but there's just a presumption that you look good to be attractive to people. And it's much like the idea of sexual connection, romantic connection always being linked. There's just this notion that, oh, well, those things go hand in hand, don't they? Like, well, they don't have to. So yeah, so sort of having kind of covered the ground bases in terms of being on the same page with everything, I wanted to talk to you about representation of asexuals in media. Now, you're obviously a booktuber, so I suspect most of your points of reference are probably going to come from that.
I never read, or I never watch movies or TV shows or anything else. I just only read books.
I cannot remember the last time I finished a book that wasn't a graphic novel, so you and I are going to be coming at this from
too, so.
Completely different sources. But, I mean, I find asexual representation to be kind of an interesting thing, because I think it might very well be the most frequently headcanoned sexuality, because it can basically be imposed on, or people can make it as part of their headcanon, any character who does not have an affirmed sexuality. You can headcanon as asexual. And I feel like I see that a lot. Maybe even, I was going to say despite a lack of much firm representation, but maybe even because of that, people headcanon it so much.
Yeah, because, well, I feel like it's something that was, 15 years ago, everyone who was looking for gay representation would be like, well, maybe these couples, because the queer baiting and all of that. But you know what I mean? People, when you don't have it, you have to look for it in something else, right? So you're like, oh, well, maybe this person and maybe this person, and oh, they, you know what I mean? They haven't had sex, or, all these things. Maybe they are like me. Like, I can imagine that as a teenager watching, like, TV and being like, oh, this person is a virgin.
Maybe that one.
Maybe that one.
Yeah. I mean, like, to my knowledge, and again, it's not a mantra I actually say on the YouTube channel as much. I say it a lot on my podcast. I'm allergic to research, so
I'm a huge nerd for research.
The degree to which I actually looked into this was very surface level, but in trying to find, like, concrete examples as opposed to headcanon and fan theory examples of asexuality, I came up with very, very little. I know a lot of people got upset with Riverdale that because a lot of people were really pulling for Jughead to be asexual, which I mean, if he's anything in the comics, maybe he's hamburger sexual.
But he is actually confirmed, I think, in the new, I don't read Archie comics, but I researched the comics that I don't read. And it says that he's, like, I think it's confirmed around the same time as Kevin was the gay, he came out as asexual. So
that makes sense.
So, yeah, he is confirmed in the comics. And I heard he was asexual, and I heard something from his actor saying that, oh, yeah, he wanted that before he got in a relationship. And I was like, oh, perfect, he's going to be ace. So I watched the first season, and I was like, he's not asexual. And it's not even like, I was like, oh, maybe they're going to bring it up as that, that common kind of trope, I guess, if someone gets into a relationship and then actually realizes their sexuality because of that relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Which doesn't happen, but I was like, oh, darn it. I don't know, I haven't watched the last, few seasons, so it might have happened, but I'm pretty sure I would have heard of it if it did.
Yeah, I think that might have made the rounds if that had happened by now. So, like, I think the only character that I could find, at least in the kind of media that that I sort of tread in, was there's a character on BoJack Horseman.
I believe it's the main character. I haven't watched it, though.
I don't think it is BoJack. I think it is one of his, like, very close friends. I think it's one of the human characters.
Okay.
Again, I don't watch it either. I've heard it's phenomenal, but I've also heard it's deeply depressing, and I have not been in a state where I am ready to imbibe a deeply depressing show. So I haven't watched it, but I do know that whichever character it is, the term is actually said.
Yes, and he goes to I think a support group, or I don't know if it's a support group, but like a group for people that are asexual, and meets a bunch of people with different sexual or different romantic orientations at that group, and I believe it's a discussion from what like I read up on it, because whenever I look for asexual characters, it only came out this year, but that one's the first one that pops up now.
Yeah. And then the only other one that I had, and I don't know how many people remember this, and I sent you the link to this.
Yes, you did.
Which is I think a little seen and even less remembered film from 1999 called The Opposite of Sex, which is a very weird movie. My memory of it is that it's good, but I have not seen the whole thing in a very long time. But Lisa Kudrow in that one plays a character, and I kind of wish I could show a clip, but I know I'll get copyright hit if I do that. So I'll just have to describe it for folks who haven't seen it. She plays a role throughout the whole story, but she has a scene in a hotel with a friend of hers, and she basically tries to explain to him her lack of interest in sex. And though the term asexual is never used, that is very clearly what she is trying to explain to him. She's like, I don't see the appeal. What is the appeal of swapping fluids? What if I came up and blew my nose on you? Would you like that? I would rather have a back rub. And and having at least rewatched that scene, it seemed like a pretty solid slice of representation. Again, though, in a movie from almost 20 years ago that I don't think anyone remembers.
Yeah, from the scene I watched, it seemed like it wouldn't represent every single person, but it did definitely, like, some of it I was like, yes, and yes.
So, knowing that you are far better read than I am, have you had any luck finding explicit asexual representation in anything that you read?
There is one book that I haven't actually read yet. It just came out this year, and I know it's going the rounds on BookTube, but it's called Let's Talk About Love by Claire Can. And it's a bi-romantic asexual character that she's the focus, and the focus is around her trying to have a romantic relationship with someone and it not be sexual, and her previous girlfriend broke up with her because she wouldn't have sex with her, and all of that funness. That is the only book that I know of that has straight up asexual representation, which is sad.
Well, since we have so few examples of actual representation, that means we get to leap into that little bit of weirdness I talked about, which would be asexual headcanon. And I know some of the more popular sort of headcanon asexuals, at least in recent years, would include Benedict Cumberbatch's version of Sherlock.
I would say there's a quote from Moffat that says, like, he refuses to make him asexual because that's not fun. But I do believe that, like, Arthur Conan Doyle totally made him asexual.
I mean, yeah.
Like, he didn't have the words because it was, like, 1900 whatever.
Yeah, the word didn't exist. I mean, the thing about Sherlock as a character, and obviously he's open to interpretation. He's been radically reinterpreted repeatedly. And so I'm not saying Moffat had to do it a certain way. But the thing about Sherlock in the books is that if he has a sex drive, his interest in that ranks below about 100 other things that he's way more interested in.
True.
So, like, he strikes me as probably one of the bigger names that strikes me as a valid headcanon. I know for myself, and I get into arguments with people over this one, my headcanon is that the Joker is asexual. My reasoning for that might be a little weird, though.
What's your reasoning?
Well, the thing is, I feel like for him, having a sex drive is too normal, and that sounds awful. I don't mean like it's abnormal to not have a sex drive, but I mean like the idea that because most people bring up the idea of him and sexuality in relation to Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
In my mind, like, he's not... I don't believe him to be sexually attracted to her, because in my mind, what he's doing with her, aside from being really screwed up, is... I can't imagine it motivated by something as commonplace as sexual attraction. That's too normal a motivation for somebody like that, I feel.
I agree. I can't imagine in my brain, like, a scene where he's just like... I don't know.
Yeah.
Like that,
I mean, Harley is hardcore attracted to him.
She's like obviously a little fangirl, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But I don't think that's reciprocal. Or at least, again, as with most headcanon, you have to often choose specific things to disregard.
Yeah. I know a big one from movies would be Elsa.
Yes. Although I think there's been probably equal headcanon pushing for her to have a girlfriend. Although I feel like asexual is a better fit, at least based off that first movie.
There's nothing to say that she's a lesbian. Like, of course she can be a lesbian because she doesn't really interact with anyone that's a girl that's not Anna, so that would be weird, of course, right?
Yes.
So you can't really know if she's attracted to women, but I still feel like that could have been shown if that was where they were going to go, right? And of course, hide it under the radar, right? Because it's Disney and you don't want to make like a huge stand about something, right? Unless it's more than 5 seconds.
Yeah, I don't expect... Like, I would be far more shocked if Disney confirmed her as a lesbian than if they... Well, I wouldn't expect them to confirm her asexual either, but I wouldn't be shocked if they just never romantically pair her at all.
Which I think is great, whether she's asexual or not, to just have, you can have a woman without having a romantic, relationship. It's not needed.
It's interesting because with her as a character, because not only is... Because you'll have female characters you go, well, she's not defined by a romantic relationship, but there's still a potential one in there as a point of reference. So, like, if you look at something like Brave... Merida is certainly not defined by a romantic or sexual attraction, but she still has to deal with this weird thing because her parents are trying to marry her off. So it's still there.
Yeah, it's the only one that's not mentioned.
Yeah, but with Elsa, there's just nothing. And actually, I hadn't even thought of how just across the board, there's like, no, it's not even a matter of her rejecting a possible... Like, no, there's just zip.
She could also be an asexual lesbian too, It's also a
this is true as well.
that could explain her lack of thoughts of it throughout, 20. She's I think 21 in the movie, right? And then she meets a woman and she's like,
a proper
I'm
adult. She's one of the few Disney queens as opposed to princesses. So yeah, I hadn't even thought about it because I just remember all the push for her as a lesbian. The asexuality flew under my radar, but I actually like that better if we're gonna headcanon that. One that in my mind, because this is a weird one for me to even bring up because it's not even a film series that I like, but it still annoyed me when they paired this character off romantically in the sequels, because based off the first film, I would have totally headcanoned this asexual, and that's Gru from Despicable Me.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about that one, but... Yeah, he seems very content.
Yeah. I feel like he kind of falls under the same category as Sherlock, which is that there are so many things that take way higher priority than all of that, and I'm on record as being a guy who gets annoyed at what I consider to be unnecessary romantic subplots anyway, but it made me doubly annoyed when they added a romantic interest for him in the sequels.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm not huge into, romance at all. I like a romance if it's, a very well-done romance, and it's not integral. Like, it's not the most important thing. Subplots that are, like, well-crafted and not the focus and don't take up too much time is totally fine. But other than that, just, no, get rid of them all.
Okay, I have an ally. Yes.
No, I watched your video on that, and I was like, he understands.
Oh, thank goodness. Trying to think. I had some others written down. I think a lot of older Doctor Who fans had headcanon the Doctor is asexual for a very long time until Tennant, basically. But
he never... I am a disgrace to all nerds. I've only watched one episode of Doctor Who ever, which was The Doctor's Daughter. But I've heard a lot, like, I don't know, that he could still be asexual based on things that happen. I'm not that well informed.
Well, here's what I would say. It's not impossible to still read the Doctor as aromantic. I think it's a stretch for the 10th Doctor specifically. It's really, asexual.
He could also be...
He could. But the thing is, any Doctor prior to Tennant, who played the 10th Doctor, could basically be read as asexual aromantic. Yes, he had a granddaughter, the first Doctor did, but also, depending on what you consider to be canon, Time Lords might not even reproduce sexually anyways. So that's not an indicator of anything. But when you get to Tennant, at the very least, he's got romantic inclinations that are pretty clear, and there do seem to be sexual ones in there as well. They seem to have moved away from them since then, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah, I feel like it's not a show that's really the point of it either.
No, and it was so weird to me that the show kind of got into the whole idea of there being that kind of chemistry or interest, even if it was one way, between the Doctor and the people traveling with him, because I'm old enough to remember, even though I wasn't watching the show at the time, but I was clued enough into nerd circles, that there was a huge uproar over the Doctor kissing somebody in the 1996 made-for-TV movie.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, the fact that became as big a feature of the show for as long as it did,
people are
the companions
obsessed with
keep
romance
following.
And sex, though. That is what I've learned.
Yeah, man, just that one's annoying.
I know.
The other one. Go ahead.
I know a huge one is Katniss Everdeen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would buy that. And again, I'm going by the movies, not the books, because
I've done both. So.
But yeah, her interactions with her quote unquote male romantic co-stars they feel very mechanical. They feel very much like the interactions of someone who knows she should be into this, but really kind of isn't.
Yeah, and there's a beautiful scene, I think, with my, I don't know how, I was 14 or so when I read them for the first time, and it's after the first Hunger Games in the second book that she's having her PTSD, and she always shares a bed with Peeta because it's comforting to her and stuff like that. And I can't remember the exact part of it, but there's something that happens, and she's like, I'd never even thought of that remotely as, sexual or bad, or, I can't remember why she's thinking this, but, it had happened for, months upon months upon months. And then something happened, and she was like, oh, this was supposed to be sexual, or people would interpret this as sexual. It didn't even cross her mind. And I feel like if she had any sex drive, you can't share a bed with someone that you clearly have at least some romantic feelings for a long period of time without something happening.
Yeah, that would be a situation that should have the kind of sexual tension you can cut with a knife, and if there's just nothing... Yeah,
it's friendship. It's he is holding her when she's going through nightmares. It's not,
No, that's a good one. Again, the one that I hadn't heard, but makes a lot of sense. Another one from TV, and this is a specific incarnation, but I'm on record as a fairly big fan of Gotham. And in my head, Oswald, the Penguin, in this version, I consider him to be asexual. Now,
Yeah, I was thinking of that, but then I was like, he comes out as gay, right?
He doesn't, though. That's not actually what happens. So, I'll say what does happen, and then I'll talk about my interpretation of it. So what does happen is he basically falls in love with Ed, with the Riddler. Yeah. But the thing is that he does seem to interpret that as love. And he does say, I love you. But there's really there's indications of him trying to get his attention and his affection. There's really no indication of a sexual interest. And in my own headcanon for this, part of what's going on here is that he has never had any connection with another human being, really, aside from his mother. So the instant he starts feeling any positive feelings towards another human being, he leaps to the most extreme interpretation of that, which is, oh, I'm in love with this person, because he lacks any frame of reference to be able to categorize it as anything else. And so that's my headcanon on that. But at the very least, I will stand by the fact there is no clear evidence that he has a sexual attraction to Ed.
Yeah, I have only watched the first season of Gotham, but I've kept up with the news of what's happened and stuff like that, and I've watched clips, and my thing was Oswald just does not seem like he's, because I heard that happen, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Just did not see that happening. But I would love to see representation of, because pretty much most of these, we look at it, it's people that don't have a lot of, they all seem to be aromantic, asexual, and it's really great to see that there can also be someone who is homoromantic, asexual, right? Which could be Oswald, which I'd be like, oh, great, right? Or he could also just be a sad soul who, his only connection is his mother, which is true as well, because it's interpretable in different ways, certainly. But yeah, it really kind of is the whole thing in a nutshell, that we have to go for our headcanon and not explicitly supported instances. I think that was the last one I had. Did you have any others? No, I don't.
Yeah. I am hopeful, at least, that probably folks watching this will probably have a few of their own to toss out there. So I just want to thank you for coming on and doing this.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So obviously you have a YouTube channel, you are a booktuber, so you're pretty much exclusively talking about books, at least so far.
Sometimes talk about other things, but yes.
I mean, it's your channel. Talk about what you like. But everybody, there will be a link down in the description for Min's channel. I would highly encourage all of you to check it out. I have been enjoying her stuff. So, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that'll do that. So, folks, guess what? Whatever your thoughts are on what Min and I talked about, asexual representation, examples of it that we didn't think of, whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Whole bunch of stuff that you can do, because there's buttons and there's links, including one to my Patreon if you feel like supporting me in that fashion. If not, don't worry about it, because there's going to be other links, including the one to Min's channel. But even if you don't want to click on those, you know what? Don't even sweat it that much, because at the end of the day, guys, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.